thought I could outrun winter by keeping my head down. I thought if I worked hard enough,
Please, sir.
God wouldn't notice how close I'd come to losing everything. She reached the gate just as the storm turned mean, snow cutting sideways, the baby under her coat breathing too shallow to cry. The man inside didn't know it yet, but by the time he opened that door, the quiet life he'd built to survive grief was already over. A child would choose him. A preacher would come knocking with a Bible and a threat. And before Christmas ended, someone would nearly die on the floor by the fire. They would call her desperate. They would call the child a sin. They would be wrong. Because what broke this house wasn't scandal. It was mercy. And what rebuilt it wasn't love spoken out loud, but hands that chose to hold instead of turn away. The strange part? The baby she begged milk for wasn't the one who changed everything. Stay with this story to the very end. Subscribe for more Western tales of faith, survival, and family. And tell us, what city are you watching from? Snow cut sideways across the prairie, hard and slanted, the kind that felt sharpened by God himself. Mara Quinn hit the wooden gate with the heel of her hand and felt the shock run up her arm. The sound vanished into the wind, swallowed like it had never been made. She pulled the basket tighter to her chest. Inside, the baby gave a sound that was not quite a cry, more a breath that forgot what it was supposed to do. His lips had lost their color. The cloth around him was damp where her breath had been trying and failing to keep him warm. She knocked again. "Sir." The word tore loose and disappeared. A lantern flared behind one of the ranch windows, a dull gold square in the storm. For a moment it looked like a Christmas candle fighting the dark. Mara held her breath, counted the baby's ribs with her forearm. 1, 2. Still breathing. A bolt slid. A door creaked open, slow and careful. A man filled the frame, tall, broad, wool coat dusted white, boots planted like he expected the ground to argue back. A rifle strap crossed his shoulder. His eyes went first to the basket. Only then did they lift to her face. "You're on Heartland," he said. His voice carried no heat. "What do you want?" Mara swallowed. Her throat burned raw from cold and prayer. "Work, sir," she said. "I'm not asking for charity." The wind shoved at her back, tried to bow her forward. She didn't let it. "I need a few coins," she went on, forcing the words steady. "Enough to buy milk." The man's jaw tightened. He took one step closer, just enough for the porch light to catch the baby's face. The infant's lashes were rimed with frost. His chest barely moved. "You just had that child," the man said. "You can't do a man's work." "I can do what you pay me for." Her voice cracked and she hated it. "Cleaning, mending, kitchen work. I won't be in your way." The man glanced past her at the open land, white, endless, closing fast with night. Christmas was 3 days away. The sky looked bruised purple and iron gray, as if even heaven was tired. "Go back to town." "There is no town that will take me." She didn't say why. The storm already knew. "Please, sir." His eyes dropped again. The baby's breathing hitched, then stilled for a second too long. Mara's heart lurched. "Lord, don't take him now." The man's hand flexed at his side, stopped short of reaching. "I'm Caleb Hart," he said, as if the name were a boundary. If you're lying, I'm not. Too fast. She forced herself to breathe. I swear it. A soft sound came from behind him, bare feet on wood. Papa? A little girl stepped into the doorway. No shoes, nightshirt too thin, dragging a small wool blanket like a promise she hadn't finished making. Her cheeks were pink from the fire. Her curls caught the lantern light. Back inside, Ren, Caleb said, firmer now. But the child didn't listen. She walked straight out onto the porch like the snow wasn't sharp, like rules were suggestions. She stopped in front of Mara and reached up, touching the frayed shawl at her shoulder with two careful fingers. She leaned in and sniffed. Mara froze. Ren looked up at her father and whispered, soft as a hymn, "She smells like home, Papa, not perfume." The words struck something unseen. Caleb's breath left him slow. He looked at Mara's bare hands, the cracked skin, the blood she hadn't wiped away. He looked at the basket held too tight against a chest, barely rising. Ren crouched and peeked inside. The baby stirred, a weak sound catching in his throat. "Baby," Ren said, smiling like she'd found Christmas early. Caleb exhaled again. His shoulders dropped a fraction, like a man setting down a weight he'd carried longer than he meant to. "Come inside," he muttered. Mara blinked. "Sir?" "1 week," he said, sharper now, like he was afraid of himself. "You work. You stay where I tell you. You don't lie." "I understand," Mara said. Her feet moved before her fear could catch them. She crossed the threshold. Warmth struck her hard, almost painful. Fire cracked in the hearth. The air smelled of stew and pine and old soap. Her knees threatened again, and again she held. Ren followed close, brushing the basket with her fingers like a blessing. Caleb shut the door against the storm. The wind slammed once, then fell back, defeated. Mara lowered the basket near the fire and peeled back the cloth just enough to see the baby's mouth open, drawing in air that wasn't killing him. For the first time in days, warmth touched her skin. I didn't ask for much, she thought, the prayer rising without permission. Just let him live through Christmas. Outside, the snow kept falling, slanted and relentless. Inside, a house that had forgotten how to hope felt something. Shift, small, quiet, and dangerous as faith. Warmth did not ask permission. It pressed in on her from every side. The kind that makes a body realize how close it has come to failing. Mara steadied herself by the bench Caleb pointed out and set the basket down at her feet, keeping one hand on it, as if the floor might steal it away. Caleb moved past her without another word. He took a kettle from the hook, filled it, set it on the stove. The motions were practiced, stripped of ceremony. A man who had learned how to keep a house alive without believing it could love him back. "Water," he said. "Cloths there." Mara nodded. She dipped a rag and pressed it to the baby's cheek, then to his chest, slow and careful. His breathing fluttered, then found a rhythm again. She counted it with her lips barely moving. "Thank you. Just for now." Ren hovered close, blanket dragging, eyes tracking the basket like it might vanish if she blinked. Mara tipped the edge just enough for the child to see. The baby's mouth opened. A sound came out, thin but there. "He's hungry," Ren said, certain. "I know," Mara whispered. Caleb watched from the table, arms folded. He did not step closer. He did not step away. The fire popped. Somewhere in the walls, the wind searched for a seam and failed. He crossed the room once, returned with a folded quilt, and laid it on the bench beside Mara. He did not say it was his wife's. He did not say it was warm because it remembered being used. Mara lifted the quilt and settled it over the basket with care, tucking the edges so no draft could find its way in. She did not thank him. Gratitude felt like a debt she couldn't afford. "Rules," Caleb said. "You stay out of my study. You don't touch the horses. You don't bring trouble here." "I won't," she said. She reached into her coat and pulled out a paper-wrapped bundle. A heel of bread, hard and honest. "I brought my own." Caleb's eyes flicked to it, then away. "You eat after you work." "Yes, sir." The house grew quieter. Not silent, just settled. Mara worked without being told. She wiped down the table, rinsed the cups, kept one foot nudging the basket so she could feel it answer back. Wren slid down beside her and broke the bread into crumbs, feeding the smallest pieces to the fire like offerings. By dawn, the frost on the window had softened. Mara rose before the light and set cornmeal to bake. She worked one-handed, rocking the basket with her heel, humming without words. The tune was old. Christmas knew it. Caleb appeared in the doorway and stopped. The smell of bread filled the room. He watched her hands, the way she checked the baby between motions. "You don't need to cook," he said. "I'm not doing it for free," she answered, and kept stirring. He nodded once. "After breakfast, floors, laundry, vegetables." "Yes, sir." Wren ate with crumbs on her chin and did not ask to be carried. That did not go unnoticed. Later, in the small laundry room, the basket sat where the draft couldn't reach. A gust slipped down the hall and lifted the cloth an inch. Caleb passed by and saw what the storm wanted him to see. No milk, no coins. A child's shirt folded too small to fit anyone living. Bread gone brittle. A tin cup with a shine of water clinging to the bottom, like hope that hadn't learned better. He stood there longer than necessary. Then he lowered the cloth back into place and shut the door as if sealing a prayer. The day broke open with work. Mara scrubbed until her knuckles split and bled again. She wrapped them and kept going. She tied the baby to her chest with linen and stepped into the barn, learned how cold breath sounds against wood, learned how to keep quiet hands. "You ever done that before?" Caleb asked from the door. "No, sir." "Quiet hands," he said, almost a smile, and walked away. By evening, the house had changed its sound. Wren grew warm and then too warm. Her breath hitched. She cried until the cry broke apart. Caleb stood at the foot of the stairs with nothing to put in his hands. Mara came without asking. She cooled a cloth, laid it across the child's brow, hummed the same tune. Wren's sobs slowed. Her body softened. She slept with her head against Mara's chest, one hand resting on the baby's blanket like a vow. Caleb watched from the doorway. He folded his arms, not for warmth, but to keep himself from stepping into something he might not survive. Outside, the snow kept falling. Inside, the fire held. "I didn't plan to stay," she thought, the truth sharp and sudden. And somewhere under that, quieter still, "I don't know how to leave." The sound of carriage wheels came wrong against the snow. Too smooth, too sure of themselves. Mara heard it through the walls while she stirred the pot, the spoon dragging slow circles through stew thickened with patience. The baby slept against her chest, bundled tight in linen, his weight a steady truth she leaned into. Wren was at the table with paper and charcoal, drawing something that looked like a house with too many doors. The wheels stopped. Laughter followed. Light. Practiced. Carried in on the cold like a scent. Caleb was already moving. He straightened his coat, ran a hand once through his hair, and opened the front door before the knock could finish deciding how sharp it wanted to be. 3 women stepped inside trailing velvet and fur, boots clean as Sunday. Their cheeks were flushed pink, not from cold, but from comfort. Rosewater bloomed in the air, thick enough to taste. "Mr. Hart," one of them said, smiling like she'd learned it in a mirror. "What a dreadful road. We thought we'd never arrive." Caleb nodded, polite and distant. "You're early." "Opportunity doesn't wait," another chimed in, glancing past him, taking inventory. Her eyes skimmed the room and paused, just a beat too long, on Mara at the stove. Mara did not look up. She kept stirring. Steam rose and wrapped her hands. The baby shifted once, then settled. She breathed when he breathed. Wren slipped off her chair and padded toward the doorway, curiosity written plain on her face. She stopped short when the perfume reached her. Her nose wrinkled. "Who are they?" she asked, not bothering to lower her voice. "Friends," Caleb said. "From town." Wren frowned, unconvinced. She turned and walked straight back to the kitchen, climbing onto the stool beside Mara as if that were the safer ground. "They smell funny," she whispered. Mara's mouth twitched. She leaned closer and said nothing. At lunch, the women sat straight-backed at the table, their laughter arranged neatly between bites. Compliments floated. About the stew, about the house, about how lonely a ranch must be in winter. One of them watched Mara over the rim of her cup. "You must be the house girl," she said, sweet as sugar laid over iron. "How fortunate you are to have found work. Milk isn't cheap these days." The spoon slipped from Wren's hand and clattered to the floor. Mara reached for it, but Wren was already standing on her chair, small fists planted on the table. "She's not begging," the child said, bright and fierce. "She works, and she smells like home." The room went still. Caleb set his fork down. The sound was soft, final. "That's enough," he said. The woman's smile faltered. "I'm sure no offense was—" "Coats," Caleb said. "Now." Silk rustled. A chair scraped. Confusion turned sharp and then indignant. Within minutes, the door closed behind them and the house exhaled like it had been holding its breath too long. Mara washed dishes in silence, her cheeks burning. She did not look at Caleb. He stood in the doorway, jaw tight. "She shouldn't have said that," he muttered. Mara shrugged, steadying the plate in her hands. "People say worse." He didn't answer. Night came heavy. Rain rattled the windows and turned the snow to slush. The fire burned low. The baby fussed, then quieted, then made a sound that didn't belong to him. Mara froze. She peeled back the cloth and felt panic slam through her chest. His skin was cold again, his breathing wrong. "No," she whispered. "No, no." She ran. Caleb was there before she finished the scream, lantern shaking in his hand. He took the baby, felt for warmth that wasn't there. Dry towels, he said. Now. He stripped his shirt and pressed the child to his bare chest, skin to skin. He stoked the fire with one hand, rubbed the baby's back with the other, firm and fast. Mara brought a small flask from her trunk. He poured and worked heat into limbs that didn't know how to hold it. Come on, little man. The baby coughed. Once. Again. Then cried. A thin, furious sound that broke the night open. Mara dropped to her knees and held him there, tears soaking into hair still damp with rain. Caleb sat back on his heels and breathed. In the quiet that followed, no one spoke of miracles, but the room felt watched over, as if something holy had stepped closer and stayed. Later, when the knock came sharp and early, it carried a book under one arm and judgment in its mouth. Mara packed without a word. She had done this before. Caleb did not let it stand. And when the house finally slept again, he laid a pair of old gloves on a stool and a folded note without a name. He began tearing down a room the next morning. Sawdust rose. Nails sang. Outside, winter tightened its grip. Inside, something had already decided not to let go. Morning broke thin and pale, the kind of light that felt borrowed. Frost still clung to the edges of the windows, but the air no longer bit the same way. Winter had loosened its grip, just enough to remind you it could tighten again. Caleb was already outside when Mara woke. She heard the first strike of the hammer before she fully opened her eyes. Wood against iron, iron against nail. A sound too deliberate to be anger, too steady to be haste. The baby slept against her chest, warm now, breathing deep and sure. She held still for a moment longer, listening. Another strike. Then another. Each one landed like a sentence spoken plain. She rose quietly and wrapped the baby tighter before stepping onto the porch. Cold brushed her ankles. The yard behind the house had been cleared down to earth. Boards lay stacked. Posts marked out a square in the ground, careful and measured. Caleb worked with his sleeves rolled, breath clouding the air. He didn't look up when she came closer. He set a beam, checked it, adjusted, then drove the nail home. "What are you doing, sir?" Mara asked. He paused only long enough to wipe his brow with his sleeve. "Fixing a problem." She waited. He kept working. "That room you're in," he said after a moment, eyes still on the wood. "It was never meant to last. Drafts run through it. Walls don't hold. And this?" She gestured to the square taking shape in the frost. "This will." She said nothing more. Words felt too light for what was happening. Instead, she stepped forward and picked up a board, held it steady when he nodded. Her hands shook once, then found their strength. They worked without ceremony. Wren came out later, hair wild, shoes forgotten. She circled the posts, inspecting. "Is this ours?" she asked. Caleb drove another nail. "It's a house." Wren beamed. "Good. Houses keep people." Mara felt something tighten in her chest. She turned away before it could show. By midday, Doc Pike rode up slow, his horse leaving deep prints in the softening ground. He took in the scene. The boards, the woman holding a beam with one arm and a baby with the other, the child arranging stones like guardians. "Well," he said, "that answers that." Caleb didn't stop working. "Does it?" Doc smiled. "It will." Later, a letter came. Eastern postmark, heavy paper. Mara recognized the hand before she opened it. Her fingers went cold. She read it once, then again, then folded it clean and set it beneath a stone by the fence, where the wind couldn't take it. Caleb noticed. He didn't ask. That night, Wren dragged a glass jar onto the table and filled it with lemon water, squeezing the fruit herself. She stuck 2 straws inside and pushed it toward them like a verdict. "You share," she said. "That's how families do." Caleb took 1 straw. Mara took the other. The jar stayed between them. Outside, snow began to fall again. Soft this time, almost apologetic. It slid off, the new beams, and melted where the ground still remembered warmth. Later, when the house grew quiet, Caleb stood alone by the half-built frame. He rested a hand on the wood, feeling the grain, the promise of walls yet to rise. "I didn't plan this," he thought. The truth came heavy and sure, and somewhere beneath it, quieter but stronger, "I won't undo it." Inside, Mara laid the baby down and listened to the hammering stop. Silence settled, not empty, but full. Winter waited. They didn't. The night chose the steps. Ice had glazed the porch without warning, a thin, treacherous skin that looked harmless until it wasn't. Wren came running from the yard with a stick in her hand and laughter in her mouth, the sound of it bright as bells. Her foot slipped. The world tipped. Wood met bone with a dull, final sound. Her cry cut straight through the house. Mara was there before the echo finished breaking. She dropped to her knees, slid an arm under the small body curled on the boards, and pulled Wren close without lifting the injured leg. The child's face went white, then red, then wet. "I didn't see it," Wren sobbed. "It was shiny." "I know," Mara said, already working. She steadied the ankle, fingers light and certain, reading swelling and heat the way some people read scripture. "Don't move. Breathe with me." Caleb burst from the barn, boots skidding, breath loud. He knelt opposite Mara, helpless for a single, terrible second. He had seen broken men and broken stock. This was worse. "She slipped," Mara said, calm, anchoring the moment. "It's likely a sprain. We keep it still. We keep her warm." Caleb nodded once. He scooped his daughter up only when Mara told him it was safe, carrying her inside as if she were made of glass. The fire took them back gladly. Mara wrapped the ankle with practiced care, tore cloth to size, pressed a poultice she mixed quick and quiet. Wren clung to her neck, tears soaking into the collar of her dress. "Sing," Wren whispered. Mara did. Low, wordless. The same tune that had pulled fever back from the edge, that had called breath into a body that wanted to forget. Wren's sobs eased. Her hand curled into Mara's sleeve and stayed. Caleb watched from the doorway, hands useless at his sides. He felt something old crack and shift in his chest. He turned away before anyone could see it. That night, he did not sleep. He sat at the table with the lamp low and the house breathing around him. He took the gloves from the drawer, the ones knit long ago, the ones he had never let warm another hand. He set them on the stool by the bench. Beside them, he placed a folded note. No name, no promise written loud enough to break, just enough. Morning came with the sound of iron and wood again. Caleb tore into the old room with purpose, boards coming free under his hands. Nails screamed. Dust rose. The past fell apart the way it always does, one piece at a time. Mara watched from the doorway, the baby warm against her chest, Wren asleep on the couch with her ankle propped and wrapped. She did not ask what the noise meant. She picked up a broom and swept the dust as it fell, making space. By afternoon, the frame outside stood higher. Sun caught the new boards and held them. Mara carried water, held beams, brushed sawdust from Caleb's sleeve without thinking. Their hands met once, brief and steady, then went back to work. Wren woke and supervised from the steps. "You missed a spot," she announced. Caleb fixed it. At supper, Wren dragged a jar from the shelf and filled it with lemon water, squeezing hard, juice running down her wrists. She placed 2 straws inside and slid it between them. "You share," she said, "because we're fixing things." They did. Outside, the snow softened, fell quiet, and let the ground show through in places. Inside, the fire held, the child slept, and the house, old and new both, stood witness. "I didn't mean for this to happen," Mara thought, watching the light move across fresh wood. And then, softer, truer, "I will not stop it." The hammer fell again, sure and patient, counting out a future neither of them said aloud. The knock came with scripture in its fist. It was sharp and impatient, the kind of knock that expected the door to open because it believed it had the right to be heard. Mara felt it in her bones before she heard it again. The baby stirred against her chest, warm and heavy. She held him closer, as if warmth could be argued with. Caleb was feeding the horses. Wren was still asleep, ankle wrapped, one sock dangling. Mara crossed the room and opened the door before the second knock could finish its sentence. A man stood on the porch in a long wool coat dusted with snow. His boots were clean. A Bible rested under his arm like a tool that had been sharpened with use. He took off his hat, did not smile. "Mara Quinn," he said, tasting the name. "You look thinner." Her breath caught. She did not step aside. "Father." He looked past her at the bundle on her chest. His mouth tightened. "And the child." Caleb appeared at the porch rail, wiping his hands on a rag. He took in the scene without hurry. The book, the boots, the way Mara's body angled, protective and set. "You'll state your business," Caleb said. "Here." The man's eyes flicked to him. "I came to take my daughter home," he said, "and to see to the future of the bastard she carries." Mara moved without thinking, turning her body fully between them. Her arm locked around the baby. "He is my son," she said. Her voice did not shake. "You will not speak of him that way." Her father's jaw worked. "You abandoned your name, your calling. You brought disgrace on this family." He lifted the Bible slightly, as if it weighed in his favor. "I will undo it." Caleb stepped onto the porch. The boards creaked under his weight. "You'll lower your voice," he said, "or you'll leave." "I have standing," the man replied. "The law recognizes a father's authority. She will return with me. The child will be raised properly. If not—" He hesitated, then chose his words like stones. "The boy will be placed where his soul can be saved." Mara's vision narrowed. The cold rushed back into her fingers. She had packed like this before. Quiet. Efficient. Like a woman folding herself smaller to survive. She turned and went inside without another word. Caleb watched her cross the room and reach for her bag. He saw the way her hands moved, fast, practiced, already resigned to loss. Something in him went hard and clear. "No," he said. The word landed solid. He stepped into the house, blocking the way to the door. "You don't take them." The man scoffed. "You would shelter sin under your roof?" Caleb's eyes did not leave Mara's face. "I would shelter people," he said. "There's a difference." Doc Pike chose that moment to step in from the yard, snow on his shoulders, hat in hand. He took in the tension, the Bible, the bag half-packed. "You planning to take a newborn out in this weather?" Doc asked mildly. "Because, if you are, you should know he nearly died of cold not 2 nights past." The man stiffened. "You have no—" "I have eyes," Doc said, "and a conscience, and I'll testify to both if asked." Caleb turned then, finally facing the man square. "You say she sinned," he said. "I say she survived. You say disgrace. I say work. You say save a soul by tearing it from its mother." His voice dropped. "That's not God's work." Silence stretched. The wind pressed its face to the windows and listened. The man's lips thinned. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," Caleb said. "But not today." The Bible shifted under the man's arm. He looked once more at Mara, at the way she stood straight despite everything, and turned away. The door closed behind him with a sound that felt final. Mara sagged against the table. Caleb did not touch her. He stood close enough that she could feel the heat from him. "I thought—" Her voice broke. She swallowed. "I thought I'd have to go." "I know," he said. Outside, the snow began again, softer this time. Inside, the baby slept on, ignorant of the line that had just been drawn. That night, Caleb built longer than the light lasted. He drove nails until his hands ached, and the ache felt right. When he finally came inside, he set more wood on the fire and placed a third chair at the table. He did not say why. Mara watched the flames climb and fall. She rested her hand on the baby's back and felt his breath answer. "I'm still here," she thought. And for the first time, it didn't feel like a question. Outside, winter waited. Inside, a house chose what it would keep. The house learned how to breathe again. It happened quietly, not all at once. The way a storm eases its grip without announcing it's done. Morning light slid across the table and stayed. The kettle sang when it should. Wren woke without crying and asked for bread instead. Mara cut the loaf and watched crumbs scatter like proof. Caleb worked through the day with a steadiness that had nothing left to prove. He set the frame true, checked his angles twice, and drove nails clean. When the sun tipped west, he carried boards inside and leaned them by the wall, measuring space with his eyes. He said little. He didn't need to. Wren hobbled out to the porch on her wrapped ankle and supervised. "That one goes there," she said, pointing with authority she hadn't earned, but carried anyway. Caleb put it there. Mara kept the house. She scrubbed, cooked, folded, moved. The baby slept and woke and slept again, his breath deep now, his color returning like it meant to stay. She fed him from what she had, warmed what needed warming, thanked God with her hands more than her mouth. At noon, Doc Pike stopped by with herbs wrapped in paper and news folded careful. "He won't push again soon," he said, nodding toward the road. Men like that prefer the long game. Caleb's mouth tightened. He won't get it. Doc studied him. You sure? Caleb looked at the house and the woman moving inside it, the child at the window. Yes. That evening, the wind shifted. It brought the smell of thaw from somewhere south, faint but unmistakable. The fire burned steady. The new frame cast a long shadow across the yard, like a promise learning its shape. They ate on the steps, bread, cheese, apples, simple things. Wren dragged the jar out again and filled it with lemon water, the rind twisting under her fingers. She put 2 straws in and pushed it between them. You share, she said, as if reminding them of a rule they'd forgotten. They did. Caleb took a long pull and wiped his mouth. Tomorrow, he said, not looking at Mara, I'll set the roof. Mara nodded. I'll hold. He glanced at her then. Just once. I know. The sun went down gentle. The sky went pale and then blue. Snow began to fall, light as ash, and didn't stay where it landed. Winter was still there, but it had lost its teeth. Later, when the house was quiet, Caleb stood in the doorway of the room that was no longer a room. The old walls were gone. The air moved through clean. He could see the place where a window would be, the line where a door would open. He thought of his wife's hands, the way they had measured fabric. He thought of the gloves he'd given away and the note he hadn't signed. He thought of a child's voice saying home and meaning it. Mara came up beside him without a sound. The baby slept against her, warm and sure. She did not ask what he was thinking. She stood where he could feel her. Christmas is coming, she said softly. Caleb nodded. It already came. She looked at him then. Really looked. He didn't turn away. I didn't come here to stay, she thought. And then, with a calm that surprised her, I came here to live. Outside, the snow fell gentle and did not last. Inside, the house held its shape, and the people inside it did too. The night did not knock politely. Wind rose after dark, not loud at first, just insistent, worrying the seams of the house like a thought that wouldn't let go. Snow followed, thicker now, wet and heavy, the kind that soaked through wool and found bone. Mara woke to the baby's breathing changing. It wasn't a cry. It was worse. A hitch, a shallow scrape of air that came late and left early. She sat up at once, hand already inside the blanket, palm pressed to his back. His skin felt wrong. Too cool. Too still. No, she whispered, the word breaking in her mouth. Not again. Lord, not again. She swung her legs off the bed and crossed the room barefoot, holding him tight. The fire had burned down low. Coals glowed dull red, tired. She stirred them with the poker, blew until sparks jumped, then froze when the baby's chest stilled for a breath too long. I can't do this alone. She didn't scream. She ran. Caleb was halfway down the hall before she reached the door to the main room, pulling on his boots, hair loose, eyes already sharp. One look at her face and he knew. What happened? He's cold, Mara said. Her voice shook now. His breathing. Caleb took the baby without asking. His hands were sure, quick. He pressed his ear, tiny chest, then swore under his breath. Fire, he said. Now. He stripped his shirt off in one motion and sat on the floor by the hearth, pulling the baby against his bare chest. Skin to skin. He wrapped them both in a dry blanket and rubbed the small back hard, steady, counting under his breath like a man who needed numbers to believe in. Mara fed the fire with shaking hands. Wood caught. Flame climbed. Heat spread slow but real. Flask, Caleb said. She ran to the trunk, fingers numb, and brought it back. He poured a little into his palm and rubbed it into the baby's feet, his legs, his back, working warmth in where it had fled. Come on, he murmured, low and fierce. Stay. The baby coughed, once, then again. Mara dropped to her knees, hands pressed to her mouth. A thin cry broke free, weak but alive, cutting through the storm like a bell rung by a trembling hand. She sobbed then, couldn't stop it. She took the baby back when Caleb nodded, tucking him inside her dress, pressing him to her heart until she felt his breath answer hers. Caleb sat back on his heels, chest heaving, eyes closed for a moment longer than necessary. He wiped his face with his sleeve and stood, feeding the fire again until the room held heat like it meant to keep it. Neither of them spoke. The wind battered the walls, snow piled against the door. But inside, something had been decided. Later, when the baby slept warm and deep, Caleb laid another quilt over them both and pulled a chair to the doorway. He sat there, awake, listening. I'll stay here, he said quietly. Just in case. Mara looked up at him. In the firelight, his face was stripped bare of distance, of rules, of the careful lines he kept drawn. Thank you, she said. He shook his head once. You don't owe me. She held the baby closer. His breath stayed steady. Outside, the storm raged itself empty. Inside, a house that had already chosen once chose again, to hold, to guard, to keep what had been given. And for the first time since winter began, the dark did not feel victorious. Morning came thin and uncertain, as if the night had argued hard and lost by inches. Snow still clung to the edges of the yard, but the wind had gone quiet, spent. Smoke lifted straight from the chimney, a sign old ranchers trusted more than clocks. Inside, the house smelled of ash and wool and something faintly sweet, the kind of calm that follows a close call. Mara woke with the baby still tucked inside her dress, his weight warm and sure against her ribs. She did not move at first. She listened. The fire murmured. Floorboards creaked once, soft, like a man changing his mind. Caleb stood by the table, shirt on now, hands wrapped around a cup he wasn't drinking from. He looked up when she stirred, then looked away again, giving her the dignity of not being watched. He kept breathing, she said quietly. Caleb nodded. He will. She slid her feet to the floor. Her knees shook once and steadied. She laid the baby down near the hearth and covered him with the quilt, tucking the corners the way she always did, tight enough to hold, loose enough to breathe. Wren appeared in the doorway, hair wild, eyes wide with the kind of fear children don't know how to hide yet. She limped forward and crouched by the baby, careful of her ankle. "He okay?" she asked. Mara smiled at her. It took effort. "He's strong." Wren considered that, then placed her small hand on the baby's blanket like a seal, I knew it. The knock came mid-morning, not sharp like before, measured, confident. Mara felt it in her spine. Her hands went still. She didn't need to look at the door to know who stood behind it. Caleb moved first. He opened the door and stepped onto the porch, closing it behind him. The cold slipped in and then was cut off. The man stood straight, Bible under his arm, breath fogging the air. He looked past Caleb toward the house, toward the life inside it. "You've had time," he said. "Now we finish this." Caleb did not raise his voice. "There's nothing to finish." "You shelter disgrace," the man replied. "You interfere with God's order." Caleb's jaw tightened. "I shelter people." Doc Pike chose that moment to ride up, slow and deliberate. He dismounted and stood beside Caleb without being asked, hat in hand. "You planning on taking a newborn out after a night like that?" Doc asked mildly. "Because I'll say plain, I won't sign off on it. Not today. Not ever." The man's lips thinned. "You forget yourself." "No," Doc said. "I remember myself just fine." Caleb spoke again, quieter now. "You're not taking them." The Bible shifted under the man's arm. "You would raise a child born of sin under your roof?" Caleb didn't hesitate. "I would raise a child who lived." Silence stretched. Snow slid from the eaves and shattered softly on the boards. Inside, Mara stood with the baby in her arms, Wren pressed to her side. She could hear their voices through the door, muffled, but clear enough. She did not pack this time. The man finally stepped back. "This isn't over." Caleb met his gaze. "It is here." The man turned and walked away, boots crunching, the road taking him back the way he came. Caleb stayed on the porch long after the sound faded. When he came inside, he shut the door with care. Mara did not rush him. She waited. "It's done," he said. She nodded once. Relief came later, slow and heavy, like thaw. That afternoon, Caleb tore down the last of the old wall. Planks came loose with a groan and a crack, dust rising into the pale light. Mara swept without being asked, making space where the past had stood. Wren sat on the steps and supervised, chin in her hands. "You're doing it wrong," she announced. Caleb smiled despite himself. "Show me." She pointed. He fixed it. By evening, the frame stood clean against the sky. The air moved through where it never had before. Possibility whistled low and steady. They ate together, simple and quiet. Bread passed hand to hand. The baby slept. The house listened. Later, when the light went gold and then thin, Caleb reached into a drawer and took out a folded pair of gloves. He set them beside Mara on the bench. "They're warm," he said. She touched them like they might disappear. "Thank you." He shook his head. They were meant to be used. Outside, winter watched and waited. Inside, the house did not flinch. The work changed its sound. Hammers no longer struck like arguments. They landed sure, measured, the way a man works when he knows where the wall is going to stand. The frame took weight. The roof line found its angle. Winter tried once more to make itself heard, then settled back, watching. Mara wore the gloves every morning. They were too big at first. She folded the cuffs, learned their shape. The leather warmed to her hands and stayed there, as if it had been waiting. She carried boards, held posts, brushed sawdust from Caleb's shoulders when the wind shifted. When the baby slept, he slept in a crate lined with flannel near the sun, his breath lifting and falling like something that trusted the world again. Wren became official help. She fetched nails in her pockets and counted them wrong. She told stories to the boards while they waited to be lifted. She declared the porch steps very important and made Caleb redo one because it didn't feel right under her foot. He redid it. At noon, they stopped and drank water in the thin winter sun. Wren brought out the jar again, 2 straws already in place, and pushed it between them. "You share," she said, not looking up. "That's the rule." Mara smiled and took 1 straw. Caleb took the other. The jar stayed where it belonged. Later, while Caleb set the last beam, Mara stood back and watched the house learn its own outline. 2 rooms, a porch, nothing grand, nothing false. A place that would hold heat and voices and the weight of ordinary days. Caleb stepped down from the ladder and wiped his hands on his pants. He didn't look at her at first. "I won't ask you to stay," he said. Mara felt the words land and waited for the rest. "But if you choose to," he went on, voice steady, "this won't be borrowed. It won't be temporary." She walked closer, the gloves creaking softly. "I don't need promises," she said. "I need walls that don't move." He nodded. "You'll have them." That night the wind turned warm enough to carry a different smell. Earth waking. Something green thinking about trying. They ate on the steps, legs stretched out, shoulders touching once and not pulling away. Wren leaned back against Mara and yawned. "This is my favorite house," she announced. "It's not finished," Caleb said. "It is," Wren replied. "We're in it." Later, when the children slept, Mara stood alone in the doorway of the new house. The floor was bare. The walls smelled of fresh wood. Moonlight cut a pale square through the window opening and lay on the ground like an invitation. She rested a hand against the frame. "I didn't think I'd live this long," she thought. The truth surprised her with its calm. Behind her, Caleb paused. He did not cross the threshold. He waited. She turned and met his eyes. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Words would have been too large, too careless. "I'll start moving things tomorrow," she said. Caleb nodded. "I'll finish the door." Outside, the night held its breath. Inside, a future took one more step forward, not with thunder, not with vows, but with the quiet agreement of 2 people who had already chosen what they would protect. And winter, for all its patience, found it had arrived too late. Christmas came without ceremony. No bells, no wreaths hung just right. Only a hush that settled over the land like grace deciding to stay. Snow fell once more in the night, soft and clean, and by morning it lay thin enough to show the grass thinking about returning. Mara woke before dawn. The baby stirred, made a small sound, then went still again, content. She sat up and listened, to the house, to the quiet, to the way the cold no longer pressed its face against the walls. The new room held its warmth. It did not sigh or shift. It kept. She crossed the yard with the baby wrapped close, boots crunching light over snow. The door to the new house stood finished now, hinges set, latch smooth. Caleb had worked late to make sure of it. He always did. Inside, the air smelled of wood and soap. Nothing else yet. She laid the baby down in the small crib they'd fashioned from a crate and a promise. She stood there a moment longer than necessary, hand resting on the rail. Thank you, Lord, she thought, not out of habit, but recognition. By the time she returned, the main house was awake. Wren sat at the table in a shirt too big, hair sticking every direction. She had arranged 3 apples in a line and was whispering to them like they might answer. Caleb poured coffee. He slid a cup toward Mara without looking, the way men do when something has become right. Morning, he said. Morning, she answered. They ate quietly. Bread warm from the oven. A little honey saved for no particular reason except hope. Wren folded her hands before eating, eyes squeezed tight. Dear God, she said, serious as a judge, thank you for our house, and the baby, and Papa not being sad all the time. Amen. Caleb swallowed hard. Later the sun, how Charles climbed pale and slow. Doc Pike rode by and tipped his hat, didn't stop. Neighbors passed on the road and did not turn their heads away. Some waved, some didn't. It was enough. Mara carried a small bundle from the old house to the new, clothes folded careful, the quilt placed last. Caleb followed with a chair, then another. Each trip made the space less empty and more theirs. Wren ran back and forth between houses, declaring what went where. That chair's for stories, she said. That one's for quiet. They listened. By afternoon, the baby slept in his own light, wrapped warm. Mara stood at the window and watched the world move on without chasing her. Caleb came up beside her, not touching. You can take the day, he said. No work. She smiled. This is work. He nodded, understanding. As evening fell, the sky cleared. Stars came out sharp and bright, the way they do after forgiveness. Caleb lit the lanterns. Their glow pooled on the snow, softening every edge. They stood on the porch together, breath rising, the cold, honest but kind. Wren leaned against Mara's leg, already half asleep. Caleb spoke, his voice low. I don't know what comes next. Mara watched the stars. Neither do some. He waited. But I know what's here, she said. He exhaled. So do I. Inside, the baby cried once, strong, impatient. Mara went to him without hurry. She lifted him, held him close, and felt his weight anchor her to the present. From the doorway, Wren looked back and smiled, small and certain. Mama, she said, like it had always been true. Mara closed her eyes. Outside, winter paused. Inside, a family spoke its first honest name aloud, and the house, faithful and quiet, kept it. Spring did not arrive all at once. It tested the ground first. One warm afternoon, one patch of mud where snow had been, one bird brave enough to sing before the others believed it. Mara noticed the change in the mornings. The light came earlier. The baby woke hungry and loud, his lungs full, his fists strong. She fed him by the window, watching frost loosen its grip on the grass. Life, she thought, still choosing us. Caleb finished the fence line the same week the creek broke free. He stood for a long time by the water, listening to it rush, then turned back toward the house without regret. Some things didn't need guarding anymore. Wren ran barefoot the first day the ground allowed it. She laughed when her feet got wet, shrieked when the mud sucked at her heels, and came back filthy and triumphant. "Look," she said, holding up her toes. "The earth likes me." "It likes everyone who listens," Mara said, wiping her clean. By then, the house had settled into itself. Chairs bore the shape of bodies. The table carried marks from knives and crayons alike. The door opened easily, without argument. Caleb watched from the porch while Mara hung laundry. The quilt lifted in the breeze, catching sunlight, bright as a flag that didn't belong to any country but this small patch of land. He walked out and took the other end of the line, steadying it. Their hands brushed once. Neither of them moved away. "I've been thinking," he said. She waited. "I don't need a minister," he went on, "or a town full of witnesses. But I won't pretend this is something it's not." Mara tied the last knot and turned to him. "Neither will I." Silence sat between them, not empty, full. That evening they ate on the steps again. Bread, stew, the lemon jar, still with 2 straws, cloudy now from use. Wren leaned back against Caleb's knee, the baby asleep against Mara's chest. A wagon passed on the road. Then another. News traveled. So did time. Caleb reached into his pocket and took out the folded paper he'd carried for weeks. He set it on the step between them. This one had a name on it now. 2, in fact. "It's filed," he said. "Nobody takes him. Nobody takes you." Mara looked at the paper. She did not touch it right away. When she did, her hand was steady. "Thank you," she said, "not as a debt, but as a truth." He nodded. "We keep what we choose." The baby stirred, made a small sound, then settled again. Mara pressed her lips to his hair. "I survived," she thought, and this time she let the word rest. As dusk came on, birds gathered in the cottonwood. Their calls stitched the evening together. Wren slid off the step and ran into the yard, arms wide, spinning until she fell laughing into the grass. "Mama," she called. "Papa, look!" They did. Caleb stood, offered his hand. Mara took it. They stepped down into the yard together, into the season that did not promise ease, only continuation. Snow lingered in the shadows. Winter never left entirely. It only learned its place. The house stood solid behind them. The door was open. The light stayed on, and whatever came next would have to pass through that threshold, where a family had already decided who belonged. As the seasons turned and the snow finally loosened its grip, the house stood steady, simple, weathered, and full of life. What began as a desperate knock in the cold became something quieter and stronger than fear. Not a miracle that shouted, but one that stayed. A roof that held. A fire that kept burning. A family that chose one another day by day. There were no grand speeches in the end. Just shared meals, small hands held tight, and the kind of faith that shows itself through work and kindness. The kind of faith many of us were raised on. The kind that says love is proven by staying when it would be easier to walk away. If this story reminded you of a winter you survived, a door you opened, or a life you helped shape without ever being thanked, then it was written for you. If you enjoyed this Western tale of hope, family, and quiet strength, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps keep these stories alive and shared. We'd also love to hear from you. Where are you watching from today? Leave your city or town in the comments and tell us what this story meant to you. Thank you for spending this time with us. Stay warm, stay kind, and we'll see you in the next story.